CARLIGH is the Consortium of Academic and Research Libraries in Ghana. And we are going to look at what ORCID offers to librarians and researchers. And this morning we have staff of ORCID. Gabriela is the engagement manager, and then we have Nabil, who is also engagement lead for East Africa and Africa. And then the main person helping us, CARLIGH, to do this webinar is Irina. Irina Koshima is the Open Access Program Manager. Ladies and gentlemen, you are welcome. So in order not to waste much time, let's go straight to the panelists and then for us to start. So Irina, maybe you can take over. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Richard, and thank you, Gabi and Nabil, for joining us today. So just a couple of housekeeping announcements. Gabi and Nabil will show slides and we'll share links to those slides. We're also recording this webinar and we'll share a recording link. If you have any questions, and we hope you do have questions, because that's the main point of this webinar, please use Q&A functionality. It's between participants and polls. It's a bottom bar of Zoom. So please use that for Q&A, and please use chat for any issues or comments. And thanks for sending some questions in advance. Gabi and Nabil have those questions and they will address them in their talks, but they will be happy to take more questions. That's all, and over to you, Gabi and Nabil.
Great. So thank you so much, Irina, for the nice presentation. And thank you, Richard, for the introduction as well. Well, listen, this is a great pleasure to be with you today and to be with the Ghanaian community and to share news and updates, to share what ORCID is doing, how we are doing that, and of course to answer to all your questions coming through and all your queries. And we are very supportive to any challenge you are facing or any issue that you are encountering with ORCID. So without much saying, so I'll give it a start with my presentation. So let me just quickly share my desktop from here. So I hope that my screen is visible. Everything is fine. Great. Great. So my name is Nabil Aziz Ksibi. I'm engagement lead for Middle East and Africa. I have along with me today Gabriela Mejias, who is the EMEA Europe, Middle East and Africa engagement manager. And as we said, we are today here to explain and share a broad, let's say, ideas and let's say findings around benefits of ORCID for the researcher and for the librarian. So I'll start with the researcher part. I'll explain what is ORCID for the researcher and how ORCID is important for the researcher, and starting by questioning what is ORCID and why we are seeing sometimes this green icon when we are signing in to submit manuscripts, why we are receiving or seeing some news and some updates regarding an identifier for persons, let's say, and for the academic community and society. So ORCID is an open non-profit organization. It's run and led by the research community. So why I'm saying run and led by the research community? Because ORCID members do vote for the board of members. So it's like ORCID members are deciding for the future of ORCID, for the strategy of ORCID, and for what is good for the open research community in general. And our board of members is very diverse and international. We have representation from a very diverse set of countries. including one from Africa. And we are open to work with all entities and all governments across the globe. So ORCID provides researchers with a unique, persistent, and totally free to use identifier, which is called ORCID ID, and that connects them reliably and clearly and transparently with their research contributions, affiliations, fundings, and facilities. And we'll have a look on how the ORCID record is looking like, and what work types can we add, and what information and data can we add and pull out from the ORCID registry. Then ORCID ID is not an author profile or an authority check. So ORCID is providing a registry with an API to access this registry, and with an ORCID record for the individual. ORCID provides also open tools as per the ORCID ID, the registry, and the different APIs, which is standing for Application Programming Interface. And that allows also transparent connection between researcher and identifiers from other, let's say, platforms, and connecting their activities and contributions. Then why ORCID? So as we are moving online and we are spreading our identity here and there at this journal, at that let's say funder or grant submission system, we are in need of a unique, let's say, digital way to identify ourselves. And this is from where is coming the ORCID ID, let's say, or identification idea, because researchers are mobile, and academics in general and the scientists are mobile. They can have different names in writings. They can have, they can change name through different circumstances. They can migrate and use, let's say, a name in different language. So there is multiple reasons why there should be a unique digital way to identify persons, let's say, and especially researchers in the research domain. Then this is, and ORCID is also helping in tackling of information overload. How is that? By connecting individuals and their contributions and their professional contributions, let's say, across disciplines, organizations, and time, and by enabling recognition of all types of research, contribution, and innovation. So with that, it shows, or it brings us the interoperability offering that ORCID is having and is proposing to the community, which is being, let's say, reliable and connecting and accepting other identifiers and other inputs, let's say, from other research platforms or databases, or how to say it, grant funding systems, or any system that is capable, let's say, to connect with the ORCID API. Then it helps also research institutions, funders, publishers, and other organizations to better track and support research work. So a dashboard can be easily built throughout the results coming from ORCID reports for a member. The use of the public API can also be a good indicator or good asset to use when building an annual report for the research output management, or for the capacity building let's say, features that are enabled in the institution. So this is in general how ORCID is helping in reducing, let's say, this amount of information coming here and there in the institution. Then it's very important to say that ORCID is helping to enter once your informations and data and reuse them as much as you want. And whenever you see this green icon or a link to connect your ID. And as you can see here, everything is done with the authorization of the individual, of the user. So here, for example, your PubMed Central, sorry, the request from Paloma to read information with visible set to trusted parties and add or update research activities. So this is depending on the scope of the integration, of course, of this system with the ORCID API. This is, like I said, this is basically done through the authorization of the user. This is also another example with different scopes where Technical University in Vain can add, let's say, other information about the user, like country or keywords. So these type of authorization that you can see when granting access to trusted parties or granting access to platforms to read through your ORCID records, or read or update or you know, pull information from your ORCID record. Then how to register. So this is very simple. You just need to type ORCID register in Google. And as soon as you open ORCID's webpage or homepage, you'll see that there are 3 steps to register. We are not requesting too much information from the user except email. So we are not entering too much in details about gender or you know, all these nationality or all these, you know, personal information. We're just requesting email address and yeah, your name, and then you select the level of privacy. But you'll see this is very simple. Then you will be asked if there is duplication of name. You'll be asked if one of the ORCID records that you see in the screen are yours or not. And then you confirm if you're recognizing your ORCID record, and then you choose that one, or you create a new one. This is very important and very useful to add multiple and different email addresses. And this is very easy to do. So you can just go to the pencil in your account page and click on that to open this pop-up window, where you can add your different or second email address very easy. And then you can also select the level of privacy that we will elaborate more, you know, in the coming slides. Yeah, from here. Then if I want to unify 2 ORCID IDs, so if I realize that I do have 2 ORCID IDs, it's very simple to do that. So this is achievable by the user. And as I said, this is because all what we are doing all what should be done under the control of the user. And the information that is contained is not combined, so only email, so that the main ID is kept. Institutions can collect, then the institutions, if they want to collect this information from the ORCID record, they can collect the primary ID through the authentication. But the merging ORCID IDs is very easy. So if you go to our support center and type in there or ask or send an email to our support team, then we can guide you through in case you are facing any challenge. Then, so if I forget my password or I want to recover my account, it's also very simple. So you just need to go to our support center, and there you can find the steps on how to reset password and how to recover, let's say, the ORCID account. So I think, yeah, so then it's very important to fill the ORCID records, the general informations. So the names, in the names field, you can add multiple names, the abbreviations, last name combinations or previous names, or even names in other different languages. Then in the keywords, this is a field where you can add the keywords related to your search activities or related to pure activities in general. Then on web pages, you can link your personal, if you have any personal web page or you want to link other profiles from other platforms, then you can use this field. In the email field, you can, as I said, and as we saw earlier, you can add multiple email addresses. Then for other IDs, yes, you can add there, if you have Scopus ID or if you have any other ID that you want to connect there, then you can use that field. And then the biography is a free descriptive text where you can add your general biography. So in terms of affiliation and employment, so as you can see here, there is two assertions and there is difference between these two assertions. So the first one is asserted by Technical University in Wien, while the second one is asserted via ORCID Assertomatic. And the third one is asserted manually via the user. So there is two ways to assert affiliations. It can be manually or from the institution. And of course, the institution is, the organization is identified by their Ringgold ID or Grade ID or soon the ROR. And it's also very important to say that data provenance equal transparency. Then on the funding side, it's very important to say that we have the dimensions wizard or search and link wizard, which can be used to upload your past, all data related to your fundings into your ORCID record. Then, yeah, we'll see examples on some funders in Africa who are working with ORCID and implementing ORCID in their workflow. And we'll see how they are benefiting of this. So, yeah. And so talking about this, the National Research Foundation in South Africa is also authenticating and connecting ORCID ID. So as you can see here, there is no manual entry in the grant submission system for the NRF. The user should sign in with their ORCID record, and then it will be connected to their NRF profile, let's say. For the African Academy of Science, they're also integrating with ORCID. And as you can see here, there is no manual entry, and the information is, let's say, connected between the African Academy of Science profile and the ORCID record of the researcher or the user or the grant submitter. There is also the third example from NACOSTI, the National Commission for Science, Technology and Innovation in Kenya, and they are implementing ORCID in their RIMS system. So basically they are providing a license for researchers to perform research in Kenya, and they integrated this or integrated ORCID in their in this RIMS system or this platform. And as you can see here, there is the integration sign-in button where you can connect with your ORCID ID. Of course, because this is like a national platform, there will be additional information that should be added, like your passport. Sorry, I think nationality and some information related to your work or your research work. Then talking about works, so it's very easy to add works either by using one of the 12 search and link wizards. And this is very easy, and you see that we have a good variety of search and link wizards that you can use to import all your works without manually adding them and losing time in filling all the details about them. Then you can add any work using a DOI, a digital object identifier. Same thing for archive ID. If you have any archive ID, you can use it to connect your work with your ORCID record, and the same thing for the PubMed ID. You can also import and export BibTeX. So if you want to import, let's say, your work from Google Scholar, this is one of the ways that you can use is to import your BibTeX file from your Google Scholar account and upload it on your ORCID record, or export it from your Google Scholar profile and import it into your ORCID record. Then you can, of course, still add manually and add all the details about your work, but this is not the recommended option, because there is all these different options to make this, let's say, action or this asset easier. So now moving to the next part, where my colleague Gabriela will be describing what is ORCID for librarians. Gabi, over to you.
Thank you, Nabil, and hi everyone. I'm Gabi Mejias. I live in Berlin, Germany, and thank you, Irina and Richard, for the invitation. It's great to be here with you today. So just a quick hello, and now I will share my screen. And I will introduce you to some additional ORCID features and information useful for you to know and to share with your researchers. So to continue with the works section of the ORCID record, this is the section where users, but also organizations, can add the contributions to research. And as you can see here, we support a wide range of contributions other than publications and papers. In fact, currently we support 43 different types of contributions or works, as we call them. And these include books, book chapters, theses and dissertations, conference abstracts, patents, annotations, preprints, and many more. Originally, these works are based on the CASRAE taxonomy of works. And we've enhanced this list with some additions based on our community feedback. Coming up soon, we are incorporating data management plan as a new work type. So this means in the future, both organizations and users will be able to add this contribution to the ORCID records. And the same way we supported a wide range of works or contributions, we support a wide range of identifiers for those contributions. So this means the works metadata can include a DOI, a handle, a URN, archive ID, a PubMed ID, and many more. And also this identifiers list is available. You have it on the slide, you can check it out. And as a community-driven organization, we also receive feedback for our community. And if there's an identifier that's not on this list, but would be useful for your community to have, please let us know. And Nabil mentioned the search and link wizards. So this is a tool also on the work section that allows you and your researchers to import works or contributions from different databases. So this allows you to easily import that data to the record without the manual entry. And the source of the information would be the database itself and not the user. And for us, again, it means adding transparency as the data provenance or the source of the information is clearly stated on the ORCID record. Some of those databases that have built this tool that allow you to import these works are BASE. This one is or might be interesting for you, is one of the biggest search engines for academic resources, and 60% of those indexed documents are open access. It's operated by the Bielefeld University Library, and they index many sources, and in Ghana they index the Ashesi Institutional Repository and the e-journals on Ghana. So this means researchers in Ghana can register for an ID and then use the search and link wizard to import their outputs. And we also have other databases such as Scopus. So users can also import data from Scopus into their ORCID record, and also import data from Crossref and from DataCite that are DOI registration agencies. Some of these tools also allow to import an identifier. So for example, if you select Scopus, it allows you to import the works and also the Scopus ID. Oops, sorry. And here you can see an example of how this looks like in an ORCID record. So you can see in this case, this is imported by BASE, the Bielefeld Academic Search Engine, and it includes a DOI, a URL, a brief description, and a list of contributors. And again, the source is the Bielefeld Academic Search Engine. And another common question we receive is duplicated works. So we have a tool that allows to combine these works that are duplicated. And you can see in this case, DataCite has added the same item twice. This is because some repositories and some services allow DOI versioning, and that's why this item is generated twice. What we have built is a tool to manage similar works, so works based on the title. So you need to select the works, click on Manage Similar Works, and then there's an authorization. It tells you the works that will be combined. So you need to click on Combine, and then the works will be grouped together on the user interface. Again, another example, you can do also, you can select all of your works, and this engine will suggest the works that have similar names or titles, and it will suggest you to combine them together. Another very interesting feature that allows researchers to save time is auto update. So this is a very interesting functionality, and I'm going to describe how it works. It starts when an author or a researcher connects an ORCID ID with a journal submission system or to a repository. When that journal or that repository registers a DOI with either Crossref or DataCite, and that ORCID ID is included or embedded in the metadata, then Crossref and DataCite will request permission to that researcher to update information on the record. And once permission has been granted, every time Crossref and DataCite generate a DOI with that ORCID ID embedded in the metadata, the ORCID record will be automatically updated. So this is a functionality that allows researchers to keep the records updated throughout time with minimum effort and without manual entry. Another interesting and relatively recent functionality is the peer review section. So this data can only be added by ORCID member organizations. This means that if no organization has written this data into your record, you won't see this section. And as Nabil mentioned, for an organization to write data onto an ORCID record, the user needs to grant permission because ORCID is researcher centered and controlled. So ORCID allows to recognize and acknowledge peer review activities. Journals and publishers can add this information into the ORCID record, and we support both anonymous and open peer review. The publisher can decide how much data they would like to add. And again, this is currently only possible to be added by these member organizations. A useful feature is the Publons integrations. So if you connect your ID, your ORCID ID into Publons when doing a review, then they will push that review into the ORCID record, as on the example on the slide. And then every 2 weeks, they will also automatically check if there are new reviews done. And if there are, they will send it automatically to the ORCID record. So again, this is the enter once and reuse often model. The researcher connects the ID, give permission to an organization, and then that organization can continue updating the ORCID record as new data is in place. And very important to mention as well, the 3 different privacy settings of an ORCID record. So when a user registers, they select the default privacy setting. There are currently 3. The first one is public, available to anyone. The second one is trusted parties. This information marked as trusted parties will only be visible to those trusted organizations. And to become a trusted organization, an institution needs to be using the API and also needs to have the permission or the authorization of the user. And the last option is private, and by default, all email addresses are marked as private on the moment of registration. And each item on the ORCID record can be set with one of these visibility settings. And researchers can see the permissions they have granted on their account settings and their trusted organizations. They can revoke this permission at any time with the trash bin icon. And we are compliant with GDPR law, this European General Data Protection legislation. And the last but not least feature I wanted to mention is that you can find researchers of your organization. We have an API search available. This means you can use the API and you can build a search query like the one on the example. And you can search all the ORCID IDs that are connected to an organization name, to an organization identifier like grid or Ringgold. And you can also find or search by other parameters like IDs connected with a specific DOI, for example. And we also have recently launched a functionality that allows you to search with this kind of search query and retrieve the results in a CSV file. So you can, for example, look for your researchers. And again, this is an example of a search query. And this is looking for or searching researchers associated with the University of Ghana by by organization name, and you will receive a table like this containing the ID, the first and last name, the affiliation, the current affiliation, and also the past affiliation. And you can find more information on the link down below. And now I'm going to hand over again to Nabil, who will share some examples of implementation and adoption in Africa.
All right, so Gabby, you want to keep sharing or must I share?
Oh yes, I can move the slides.
As you wish. Okay, cool. So yeah, so I'll be briefly talking about ORCID in Africa, what we are doing here, and yeah, how can you let's say help us and support our mission. So yeah, in this slide we can see the evolution of the ORCID IDs registered with email domain edu.jh. And as you can see, this number is moving, growing exponentially. This is due, and this is because of you, basically, because of the community, because of librarian push in using ORCID ID, because of researchers departments advising and mandating the use of ORCID ID, and because of that, the fact that the researcher is or do aim to submit in other platforms, and they request this ORCID ID. But this is what we want to actually avoid. We want to have the researcher in filling all the details about their ORCID ID and the ORCID record, and know very much how to use his or her ORCID ID and the level of privacy and all related to that. And yeah, so the second table is showing like a classification of the most used or the ORCID IDs or the number of ORCID IDs in universities in Ghana. And as you can see, University of Ghana is having around 530 ORCID IDs registered with that Ringgold ID. So yeah, next slide, please. Then yeah, so I was preparing this webinar and the slides, and I was discovering that children in Ghana are giving the name of the day they were born in, and this is really special for me and as an information, because I'm still discovering this, and this is really great. So don't tell me that there is no duplication of names. I'm sure that this will be or this is a common challenge or issue. And I'm sure that ORCID can help, at least in the academic field or academic discipline, can help in disambiguating this duplication of names. And as you can see here in the map, how Ghana is standing in the region, and the number of users, let's say, throughout the last 3 years that interacted with the ORCID API. Then next, we can talk a bit about the Kenya experience and how we saw that the African Academy of Science is integrating with ORCID, how NACOSTI is also integrating with ORCID, and there is other entities, let's say, and organizations that are also using ORCID in their workflow, like the Pan-African Medical Journal and like the University of Strathmore. So this slide is showing this diverse, let's say, integrations that you can do in publishing system or in RIMS, repository institutional management systems, or in funding systems, or research permit or license systems or platforms. Then in South Africa, on the other hand, we do have 20 members, including 1 funding agency, 1 business school, and 1 group publisher. We do have a consortium led by TENET, which is the local NRN in South Africa, the National and Research Education Networking Body. And they do support 17 members in integrating with ORCID, in learning the news about ORCID, in participating, let's say, in being active in the community. Then, yes, so the join us part is Gabi's part. So if you want to go ahead, Gabi, please.
Thank you, and hi again. What we'd like to invite you to do is also to integrate our APIs. APIs stands for Application Programming Interface. It's basically a tool that allows your systems to communicate with the ORCID registry and to exchange data with the ORCID registry and import data from researchers' records, or write data to researchers' ORCID IDs, and allows for those researchers to grant permissions. So we have 2 different types of APIs, a public API that's freely available to anyone. With this API, you can obtain an ID, you can read or import all public data on ORCID records, and as we've seen previously, most of the data on ORCID records, around 90%, is public data. So you can access a lot of data with the public API. And you can facilitate the creation of new ORCID IDs. This means you can incorporate these into your workflows and add a button to your applications, to your repositories or journals, and allow people to either connect the ID, or if they don't have one, to register and connect that ID. Then we have a member API that allows to the same functionalities of the public API, and it also allows you to add an additional visibility setting, trusted parties. Of course, if the researcher, and only if the researcher has granted permission. And the interesting part is that it allows you to write data onto ORCID records, and we've seen some examples on how that looks like on an ORCID record. If you add an item, for example, a publication, an affiliation, a funding item, with the member API, you also have permission to update that item. For example, you can change the title of the publication or update the metadata. And the member API, we also have a premium features for our consortium members, and this includes monthly reports and also a functionality called webhooks that allows to receive a notification or a ping every time something changes on one of the connected ORCID IDs your system has access to. We have a production environment. That's where our registry with the more of 9 million IDs is. And we also have a sandbox or testing environment. So you can start testing these APIs, these functionalities in the testing environment for free. And you can have more information on the links down below. And for those of you interested in integrating ORCID, especially in DSpace repositories, the good news is that one of our institutional members, the King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, has released last year during the Open Access Week their integration solution. This is based in 2 parts: an user interface application that allows researchers to connect the ID and allows the institution to obtain those permissions to read data or to write data. So it supports both the basic and the member API. And this is designed for DSpace 5 and 6. And the second part of the solution is a DSpace patch that allow those connected IDs on the first interface to push those into DSpace. This is an open source solution that everybody can use, and you can have more information on the GitHub links. And for those of you using OJS, there's also a ready-made integration. So OJS 3.1.2 or later version has an ORCID profile plugin. And this plugin supports both the basic and the member API. And it allows you, so here you can see on the screen, this is the information you need to enter. This is the API credentials that identify your institution and your integration in the ORCID registry. And this is how it looks like from the author perspective. So when authors submit a manuscript, they have this button here to create a new ID if they don't have one, or connect an existing ORCID ID. As you can see on the screen, they need to, the author, the user always needs to sign in to the ORCID record and grant permission to the organization, in this case, to obtain the ID. And once permission has been granted, for those using the member API, the article metadata can be added to that ORCID record. This is an example from an ORCID record that has this item added twice, one by the journals of a Heidelberg University Library in Germany. But this organization registers DOIs with DataCite. So this user has granted permission to these 2 organizations. So both of them have added this metadata to the ORCID record, and since they share the same DOI, both works are grouped together automatically. And again, for us, this means adding more transparency because there are multiple sources validating that this person has contributed to this journal article. And you can find more information on the plugin on the link down below. And then we also have some webinar tutorials in Vimeo. So to finish with the presentation, this is our vision of what we want to achieve. We want to build open research infrastructure and promote more interoperability between systems. And as you can see, we work we aim to work with the whole research ecosystem. So with all organizations across different sectors and countries and disciplines. These are some of the systems that already have an ORCID integration. If you're using a system that is not on this list, you can still integrate with ORCID, but then you would need to do some development work on your own. But what we want to invite you to do is to integrate ORCID IDs and ORCID APIs into your systems to obtain IDs with the researcher's permission, and also to save your researcher's time and write data onto the records, or deposit that data with other organizations. For example, if you're using or registering DOIs with Crossref or DataCite, you can include those IDs in the DOI metadata, and then they would be able to share that information and connect that information into an ORCID record. So if you're interested and have more questions, please contact us. We are here to hear from you, to help you, and thank you a lot for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Gabi and Nabil. It was very informative, and there were lots of positive comments in the chat. I see 3 questions in Q&A, so maybe let's start with them. So the first one is, how does ORCID function differently from other systems like ResearchGate or DOR? I guess Directory of Open Access Repositories here.
Yes, so ORCID is a persistent identifier. That's the ORCID ID. ResearchGate is not a persistent identifier. It's a profile platform. The difference between ORCID is that, again, as we want to foster this interoperability, we are open to work with any institution, and those institutions can integrate ORCID ID, and they can also add their data into an ORCID record. For example, it's possible to connect an ORCID ID with an Scopus ID, with an ISNI ID, with a loop profile, and with many other tools that want to work with us. That's why we offer these APIs, so that organizations can, for example, link and connect their profile links or pages into an ORCID record. The other part of the question is the directory of open access repositories. So ORCID is a registry of identifiers. There are many repositories integrating ORCID and sharing their data via ORCID records. But what ORCID offers is a registry or directory of individual identifiers, the ORCID IDs, and their data.
Thanks a lot. The next question is, what is the need of linking other IDs or research accounts with ORCID?
Yeah, I can take that one. So yeah, so basically, this is to echo what Gabi just said as an answer to this question. And yeah, this is to mainly build this interoperability between systems. And of course, if you have an institutional identifier that you want to use and you want to keep in your profile, then you can use it, and link it to your ORCID account. So basically, and mainly, this is the main reason, is to have this accessibility, let's say, and this window to connect and know the other identifiers of the ORCID ID holder. And this is basically also to have this possibility to connect this one unique, let's say, Scopus ID that you are using and avoiding any duplication, and link it to that, to your ORCID record. And Scopus ID is just an example, but yeah, I hope that this is replying to your question.
Thank you. And to build on what Nabil just said, the benefit of ORCID is that it allows you to connect multiple sources of information and data in one place, and that's the ORCID ID, and that identifier can follow you or your researchers throughout their career. So for example, if you connect your ORCID ID to your repository, and that repository has an integration that adds the outputs or the contributions for that researcher, then if the researcher leaves the institution, they can still be connected to those publications that sit on the repository, and all this is linked by persistent identifiers for publications, for data sets, and more. Another benefit of linking ORCID ID to multiple researcher accounts or platforms is that ORCID allows you to connect data from different sources. So for example, you can connect your Scopus ID or your ISNI ID, but that is associated to some kind of contributions, while the ORCID record allows you to have connected information on your record from many different type of contributions and activities like funding, peer review, affiliation, and more, and that we work with a wide range of organizations that can share and add this data onto records.
I see that a couple of you asked about slides. I would like to stress once again that you will receive via email slides and also recorded link. So don't worry about that, sir. Thanks, Gabi and Nabil. Next question is, can one link versions without combining, collapsing them? I guess versions of publications.
So it's possible to add multiple DOIs, for example, or multiple identifiers. If there are two, for example, two DOIs exactly the same, and the relation between the DOI and the work is self, those items will be automatically grouped together. And again, this is intended because then you don't see two outputs when there's only one output, but two different versions of the same DOI. So the collapsing or the combining will happen automatically if the DOI is the same. And if it's a DOI that has two versions, then you will need to combine it yourself. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks. The next question is, what happens to data and researcher details when duplicated accounts are merged?
You want to take this one, or Gabi, or want to go ahead? Yeah, so basically only the email is kept. So if two accounts are merged, then yeah, so the email is kept, but the data is much of a combined. I don't know, Gab, you want to jump in and help on this one?
So as Nabil said, when two IDs are merged together, you have to choose, the user has to choose a primary ID. So we recommend that the ID that has more data is kept as primary. And then the information from the secondary, ID will be removed and deleted. The only thing that will be kept will be the email address on that secondary ID, as Nabil said, that will be transferred to the primary ID. And that ID that has been merged will be deactivated. So ORCID IDs are persistent identifiers, meaning we never delete the ID, so the string with the numbers. But if you deactivate it, or if you merge two IDs in one, the merge ID you will still be able to see the string, and it will say this ID has been deactivated.
Thanks. And I don't see any other questions. Some of the questions were answered in writing. So if you didn't hear your question, check this answered box, and they were answered.
Irina, there's a question here, and then just want to find out, how do you register your IR to the ORCID?
The institutional repository.
That's right.
You don't have to register. There's not a registration process, but what you can do is integrate this tool, this API. For that, there's a link to request credentials. So a client ID and a client secret that identifies your repository in the ORCID registry and allows you to exchange data. But you don't register the repository itself, you register the API credentials, and then you need to plug these credentials either in a system that already has an integration with ORCID, or build an integration yourself. And we can share more information on the links. And one example of this is the DSpace integration, the solution of KAUST. That allows you to have this kind of connection to the ORCID registry.
Richard, sorry to round up on what Gabi just said. So I saw that you are using, or you had a publication in the KNUST space, right?
That's right.
So yes, so on institutional repositories. So I'm wondering what version of DSpace was that, and yeah, we can discuss further, let's say, on the possibilities of having that instance, let's say, integrating with ORCID, yeah, and the next steps.
That's correct. Okay, that's fine. So we'll work on that later. Then there's another question here: is do predatory journals also apply for ORCID? And if you are accepting some of these, whatever, do you do quality assurance before you accept them?
Gabi, do you want the pleasure to?
Yes, but I didn't understand the question. Can you please repeat, Richard?
Okay. You remember in your presentation you was talking about organizations can apply for ORCID and all that, and I'm saying that you may have a predatory journal that may want to have access to ORCID IEs for its articles or whatever. Do you allow such journals to come on board, or you do real peer review quality assurance before you get them on board? Okay,
so the answer has two parts. So the first part is that identifiers, again, are only for individuals, not for organizations. Organizations interact with ORCID records and with the data on the ORCID registry by integrating these APIs. And again, in some systems, this is very straightforward. For example, for journal systems, if you are using OJS 3.142 or a later version, you don't need to make any kind of development yourself. You just need to register for these API credentials, plug them into the settings of the ORCID profile plugin in OJS, and then you can start collecting IDs for authors and for co-authors. And everyone, the public API is freely available to anyone, so everybody can use it. We don't do any control of that. So any journal interested in integrating our APIs can do it. And for the member API, institutional membership is required. And we don't do any quality control for journals using the public API. We don't, it's freely available to anyone, so anyone can use it. For member organizations that are using our member API, we do have some minimum metadata requirements that they need to fulfill. So they need to add always a title for the work and a work identifier and some additional data. But we don't do any other kind of quality control. And again, what we want to, what we offer is infrastructure and tools to build infrastructure and connections between systems. But, and we offer these tools to build transparency in this research infrastructure. But we believe trust is it's something that's developed by the community. So we don't do any kind of further quality control for journals. And I hope that answers the question.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Thanks. There is another question. Does ORCID organization carry out any verification and validation process to get validated, verified researcher profiles?
There is a validation step. So you can register your ID and connect it to systems. But to start editing the ORCID ID yourself, you have to validate the email address. And this process is similar to some other services. So you register with an email address, and then we trigger an email to that address, and the user needs to validate the email address. But we don't do any other kind of verification. And again, what we think is trust comes from the community. So everybody can register for an ORCID ID. We don't verify that that person is a researcher or a contributor to research. But then when that person connects the ID, for example, to an institutional repository or to a CRIS or to a journal system, and those organizations start adding data to that record, then those organizations are validating that that person is affiliated and engaged in some activities, some research activities with those organizations. So we offer the infrastructure to build and increase trust and transparency, but we cannot do that on our own. We need and we rely on the community to do this.
And as a small addition to what Gabi just said, we do only have some exception in verifying, let's say, the identity of the user when they lose the password and they contact us to let's say help them and support them in recovering this password. And there we are requiring and let's say requesting like a simple license or passport or national ID or even a student card.
Thanks. And one more question. What are the advantages of ORCID comparing to other networks, for example, Mendeley?
So I think this is also connected to the previous question about comparison of ORCID and ResearchGate. So the advantage of ORCID is that ORCID is interoperable. So you are not how can I say, captive on a place, but you can connect your ID in multiple systems, in other research profiles, in CRIS systems, in repositories, in journals, when you do peer review, when you apply for a grant. And profile platforms do not offer this functionality. So here the big advantage is the interoperability. And that also ORCID's core values are researcher consent So that's why for an organization to write data on your ORCID record, the user needs to authorize. You can revoke those permissions at any time, and also researcher privacy. So the user sets the privacy of the ORCID record and can see and determine who has access to that information.
And I think another important aspect to add that it's open and it's managed by the community. So it's a community organization. It doesn't belong to a private company or private publisher. And
yeah.
I think there's a question down there. It says that does ORCID provide or improve visibility of research outputs?
Well, we already answered that.
Okay, all right.
But the last one hasn't been answered yet. Is it possible to search institutions that doesn't have subscription with ORCID?
Yes, yes. So if your organization, so if you're asking about searching the IDs of those researchers connected or affiliated to your organization, and if you're referring to the search functionalities that I mentioned, yes, that's publicly available for both member organizations and non-member organizations.
Thanks. And another good question. We need documents on ORCID to be more knowledgeable about it. Could you please send them in our emails? So is there anything except knowledge base that we could share? Or I don't know,
Yeah,
maybe you could share a screen and show knowledge base.
Yeah, so if you simply go to our website and click, let's say, see our, let's say, communication resources. So if I can type ORCID communication resources and dig into our member support, then you can find all what you need to know about trademark and display guidelines, about links or text examples that you can integrate or use in your integration, and a lot of user information like the brand and button that you can use, and of course an idea on the authorization and the authorization window, how it looks like, and yeah, everything that that you want to know regarding that. And yeah, so you can dive in through all the support center, and if there's no answer to your question, then please feel free to contact us either from the Google API open group or through the support desk.
Thanks a lot. I don't see any other questions, and I would like to mention also, and I wrote that in a chat, that Gabi will be speaking again on Monday on another webinar about persistent identifiers. It's a Lipsen's webinar that would also address identifiers for publications like DOIs, identifiers for organizations like ROR, and identifiers for researchers ORCID, and the role they play in open infrastructures. So if you're interested, please join that webinar on Monday, 11 GMT UTC, and there is a registration link in the chat. Thanks a lot for joining us today, and thanks a lot, CARLIGH, for organizing this webinar, and of course, thanks a million to Gabi and Nabil for.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and we look forward to continue this discussion afterwards as well, per email, on Twitter, or just reach out to us. So thanks again, Irina and Richard, for the invitation.
Yeah, so thank you so much, CARLIGH, and thank you so much, Richard, for the invitation, and thank you, Irina, for coordinating and doing the magic on this. And yeah, I hope that we continue and, let's say, follow up on this discussion and work with you all.
Right, thank you very much, everyone, for coming, and again, thank you, panelists, for having this with us. So we are hoping to have more. CARLIGH is having more of such training. So anytime you hear of some of these or you see some of these trainings, kindly register, and then definitely you leave here with something good. And I believe today we've all learned something good, and we're going to improve more on the use of ORCID.